Hey guys, and welcome back to the Captain's Corner podcast. Joining us shortly here, the captain himself, Nick Masci. I am your co-host, Ray Russell, and in order to get this thing going right, we got to bring him back onto the show. So I ask that ever-important question. What's happening, Captain?
Well, Ray, thank you for the introduction. And the only thing better than your first dip in the water is your second dip. And we are back with episode 2 of the Captain's Corner podcast. A lot of intriguing stuff happening recently. August started with a bang. We had a bunch of virtual signings and a really big international private signing. Over the last week and a half, we had virtual signings with Val Venus, who has been in the news recently for the wrestling news, at least, for better or worse. We had Loverboy Dennis Condrey from the Midnight Express. And let me tell you something. I know Dennis has had, surgery on his vocal cords over the last few years, for health purposes. And I wasn't expecting him to be as open and as talkative as he was. And I could tell you, Ray, it was one of the best virtual signings we've ever had. Nothing but 2 hours of stories about Cornette, Heyman, Bobby Eaton. Really, wow. If you haven't checked it out, Ray, or anyone out here hasn't checked it out, I strongly recommend check out the virtual signing with Dennis Condrey. We had one of his friends in the room while recording, and he was saying, I've known Dennis for 20 years. I've never heard him talk, this outgoing and honest about everything. So it was a really good time. Also had the person that actually sold the most pictures, surprisingly, we also had our good friend Len Denton, the grappler, who bringing up on the tail end of this. Well, NWA's Ella Envy actually sold out of all of her photos. It's been a few years since they've had a signing where every single photo option has sold. And Ella Envy is one to watch out for. She's in the NWA right now, but I'm sure she's got a lot of places she's going to see before it's all said and done. And we also had a private signing with, courtesy of our friends at Premier Signatures, with international superstar Masahiro Chono.
Amazing. So I saw that on Facebook. Wow.
Yeah, so I'm a huge New Japan fan, and Chono was one of my favorites. So I could tell you that I was really excited about that one. We've got a bunch of mail-ins, a bunch of photos have already been claimed. But if there's anyone listening that hasn't checked out our Facebook page over at Captain's Corner in the last couple of weeks, we have items from all of those guests up on the main page now. So check that out. But the reason for the season today is episode 2. And we're going to talk about the upcoming Portland Wrestling Expo, Ray, and that'll be on Saturday, February 22nd. We're going to talk about it with my good friend Jeff Manning.
Yo.
Hey, Jeff, how you doing, buddy?
Can you guys hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, I was worried before, modern technology and Nick and I being so damn old, we don't know anything about modern technology.
Jeff, I wish I was as young as Jeff. Jeff, how's it going, my friend?
It is going good since we last chit-chatted. I'm looking forward to next February. Really am. I don't know how you got me involved in this. I guess we can blame Mr. Denton for that little thing going on, but it's going to be fun.
And Jeff, you've been our man on the streets, our local guy in the Pacific Northwest. Just to everyone that tuned in, Ray normally does a great job of introducing everyone. I'm going to introduce you just because you've been so helpful over the last 5 or 6 months with really helping us navigate, the distance between myself and the Pacific Northwest. I've actually never been out there yet. I'm throwing a convention out there. And
we were actually thinking about having you stay home. Maybe Ray can come out and do it without you. I don't know.
Oh, there you go. there you go. Now, Jeff, tell me a little bit about your history. I know you've promoted some wrestling over in the Pacific Northwest the last 20, 25 years. Maybe talk about your introduction to the business and then how you started to get your feet wet in the professional wrestling.
Okay. This makes a very interesting story how I got into the business. I was a radio DJ on real radio stations where you had to be live and funny, right? And I was training a kid who was going to come in and do the evening shift. He was doing ring announcing of all places out at the Cow Palace in San Francisco. And he got me into wrestling. I got him into radio, and it's been downhill ever since. Look, it's been fun. We had a couple TV shows out here. We had one on the Fox affiliate in Portland for almost 5 years. I don't know how many episodes, lots of them, 200 and something episodes we have in the can. We started Paragon out of Las Vegas that was on the very popular Pop TV station, formerly the TV Guide channel. And we did that for 2.5 years. And of course, we had local shows. I worked up here for 15 years with our shows. Started in California for a little bit, actually, previously, but the wife and I decided to dump Cali and move up to Oregon. Clean air. Well, let's leave it at clean air. But I love the business. I hate the business. You know about that. I've refereed for years. I'm a heel manager still right now. I'm on a broadcast team for a company up outside of Seattle that I work with, and he lets me tell him what to do, and sometimes he listens. His name is J.D. Mason. Wrestled for me when he was 19 when we first started out. Decided to be brave and start his own company, which is either brave or stupid. Right, Nick?
Yeah, I guess either or, and sometimes both.
And it's blossomed into whatever I'm doing now. I was trying to retire. The pandemic was a good reason for me to stop doing television shows. I love them, but it's a lot of work. And sometimes we had almost like the old days when the guys were driving city to city. We did Friday in Vegas, Saturday in Portland, and we do our Sunday house show, an hour drive from that. So a lot of these guys they were so tired after the first night. Oh, gee whiz. They never would have made it as old timers, I don't think. Nice kids, most of them. I'm not criticizing that. A lot of really good kids worked for me and with me, but they don't know the history and the hazards of being an old school wrestler do a show, drive 6 hours, sleep in your car, do a show, drive 6 miles or 60 miles again, and so on. So, but it's fun. It has moments, and that's how I did this. I got into it, and I'm trying to retire, but now that I turned 40, I don't really want to retire totally.
Well, you look great for 40, Jeff. And once you're in, like the Hotel California, you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. Now, before you got into the business, though, Jeff, what are some of your memories maybe as a fan? Growing up watching wrestling, was there any particular wrestler or moment that stood out for you?
I knew you were going to ask that. I was born and raised in beautiful Los Angeles, and Friday nights you could go to the Olympic Auditorium for $5 and watch wrestling. The next night you could go watch roller derby for $5, and that was a lot of what I did growing up. $10 for a weekend, even back in those days. In the old days, when some of your folks will remember the name Dick Lane, who was the announcer. He was Mr. Whoa Nilly. Ric Flair's got nothing on him with his whoa. And we had Freddie Blassie wrestled down there, John Tolis, Tito Santana when he was young, Pedro Morales. The Iron Sheik actually was down there, and that's typical of who was wrestling in that territory. It was run by Mike LaBelle, who was Judo Gene LaBelle's older or younger brother. I forget which direction he goes. And that's how I got into enjoying it. Old school, which the show we're tentatively planning for next February will be an old school show. So all the old timers who were there will hopefully enjoy it, and a lot of the other people who will come watch the show.
Well, you brought up that legendary Los Angeles territory, Jeff, and the LaBelles ran that for years. Someone that was part of the Portland territory and the Los Angeles territory is no longer with us, Roddy Piper. Do you have any memories of seeing Piper before he got to Portland, or just maybe a memory that stands out maybe from his career in general?
It's funny, not with his career, but this is a great story about I'd met Rowdy because he lived in the Portland area. Of course, I watched him in Southern California, and I didn't like him back then, which was okay because he didn't want to be liked. But he was running a show called Portland Uncut up here in the Portland area. And for reasons that I will not discuss, the show had to be pulled. And I thought we'd have a shot at it. Roddy got a hold of me through Lenny and said, let's get together and meet. I want to continue the show. I said, sure. The only problem, and Roddy joked about this before he passed away, he wanted X amount of dollars, no matter whether we had income or not, because he wanted the money. I said, Roddy, that's not how business partners work. If we're equal partners, we each pay half, we each get half back. He couldn't understand that concept. We went around and around. We met 4 or 5 times. Finally, I said, to hell with it. We went to the TV station and said, I can do this show, blah, blah, blah. We worked out a deal and we got it. Then Roddy got pissy with me, but then he realized that he shouldn't have because he blew it. And I said, you can come on anytime you want to come help us, but not for the amount of money you want. And that amount of money was, I'll be honest, it was $10,000. And he can get that. He could get $10,000 back then just making signs.
Sure.
But that's how I never met Roddy in person until then. And we talk still every so often before he passed away. Super dude, though, and so knowledgeable. People who didn't take advantage of his knowledge when he was on somebody's show were crazy. Well, stupid.
You brought up another name there, and mutual friend of ours, of course, very close with Roddy Piper. And I'll announce it here on the show. And breaking news for anyone, because this hasn't been on social media yet. The first announced guest for the Professional Wrestling Expo, the PW Expo that's coming to the Holiday Inn Airport at Portland International on February 22nd, 2025, will be our good friend Lenny Denton, the Grappler. And, of course, Jeff will be there as well. So Jeff and Lenny are our first two guests. But, Jeff, why don't you talk about how you met Lenny? And I know Lenny was a part of a big wrestling company that you were running in the Pacific Northwest about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Yep. We had WC Wrestling. We just started doing house shows. We went all over Oregon with the shows. We had the chance. I'd wanted to do a TV show. I was in broadcasting my whole life, radio mostly, but did TV voiceovers, all that stuff. And we somehow got involved in Las Vegas first with Paragon. And I'd met Lenny years ago with Frank Culbertson's version of Portland Wrestling when he was there booking. We had a school. We'd bring our students to help do his ring crew because he had no ring crew. And that's when I met Lenny. We kind of hit it off, didn't think much of it. And then I decided he hit me up, I think, one day for some reason. I don't remember what hell it was. And we rehooked, and I put him to work for me. And he has never forgiven me for that in a way because he wanted to get back in the business, and I gave him a shot. You know, was he perfect? Of course. He's Len Denton, the Grappler. And then he and I ended up managing a heel faction. I was the attorney with the faction, and he was the guy that got in all the trouble. And I do remember one thing. He did want to retire eventually. It was during a Portland TV taping, and I was on color commentary. And I didn't know what this was going to be his last day. He didn't want to tell me. And he gets in the ring after his managerial thing, takes his boots off and walked out. And I about broke down in tears. It was just hard, really hard for me because we become real close. And my wife liked him. So then I worry a bit. But, you know, you can convince a wife sometimes the guys are good. No, Lenny was awesome. He is awesome. And we had more fun together. I took him down to work Dave Marquez's Championship Wrestling from Hollywood a bunch of times. And we'd fly down together, and he hated to fly. If there was any kind of turbulence, I don't know whether he was going to grab me or choke me, but either way, he hates flying. Maybe he's over now that he's more mature and older.
I don't know if he still hates flying, but I know he's not much more mature. I'm just kidding, Lenny. No, I'm sorry, Lenny, but no, we had Lenny on recently on our Captain's Corner virtual signing, and Lenny was actually the first guest on the podcast. So,
nice.
Lenny was a fantastic guest, and Lenny will be a big part of Pro Wrestling Expo coming up on February 22nd. Now, Jeff, why don't you tell everyone about some of the companies that you are still helping out, and maybe what's going on in the very near future outside the PWE, of course.
I am down to one that I'm helping. I was flying at a number of places. I do have, Zoom promo classes, believe it or not, teach kids who can't talk how to talk. I've got a bunch of kids. I'm getting a couple out of the Midwest. I got one back east, but I have most of the students at the school at Northwest Pro. That's the only company I'm working with right now. It's a handful because the more he wants to do, the more he says, Jeff, will you take care of this? Sure. So we did do our first taping. We are doing a almost live 30-minute wrestling talk show, kind of not like what WWF did, but kind of similar. And I am the sidekick to the Johnny Carson main host. So I get all the crap and I have to be funny. It's not easy being funny. Obviously, you know that, Nick, because you are not funny.
I try my
You're
best.
also not good looking, but that's okay. No, I'm just kidding.
Now you're lying.
But we had our first tapings on that Friday. We had a show on Saturday. He's been doing this 11 years. And when I ran into him in Denver when I was working with Rocky Mountain Pro in Denver for a couple of years, he'd gotten booked out there. He didn't know I was coming. I didn't know he was there. And I walk in and I can't tell you what he said. This is a semi-family show, so I won't use the expletives that JD used, but he begged me to come help him turn the show around because he knew I understand the business and the business of a business, which sadly, and I don't mean to be cruel to a lot of the promoters out there, a lot of them are wrestlers without a business background. And although I love the business, it is still a business. And every show I ran, I treated like a business. Real quick side note on this, or sidebar, when we needed to be able to finance the Paragon show, people said, oh, you're using all your money first. I didn't have that much money. But I said, no, if I could not have gotten a business loan or line of credit, there would have been no Paragon. An idiot bank gave me $1.5 million business line of credit, which we finally finished paying off about 3 years ago. So 2 years after the show was done. But I would never run a company on my personal money. I would never do it. You can't. And a lot of guys do, and it hurts. But JD's getting the hang of it. He's giving me more things to do. Some I like, some I don't, but that's part of helping somebody run a company. But he's a good kid. He's 35 now. Was 17 or 18 or 19 when he wrestled for me years ago in our infancy. In an Elks Lodge, of course. Who didn't start in an Elks Lodge, right? How many smaller companies started in an Elks Lodge or similar? I ask you that, Nick. How many?
Oh, I don't have an exact amount, but I know it's got to be in the dozens, if not hundreds at this point. Yeah.
At least. It's the way to go. We had like 11-foot ceilings, and our locker room was actually an oversized closet, storage closet. Those were the days. And our first school was almost like an outhouse. It was outdoors. It had no walls on two sides, and there was an outhouse about 50 feet from the building. And that was our first unheated, unair-conditioned, open-air class area. You know, you got to live like the old timers did and do that stuff. And it was, would I do it again? Probably. That's how dumb I am. But I would do it.
You're not too dumb, because you'll be a part of the Pro Wrestling Expo on Saturday, February 22nd. And I think a little birdie told me there's a good chance that Northwest Pro can be involved too. So details to come on that. Well,
Northwest Pro, I know some of your volunteer help that will work for free, which is always nice. All want to come down and see what's going on. And we're working on a wrestling show for Friday evening. One of those old school 90-minute, no intermissions, no nothing shows. Old school with a new school twist, as we call it, but it will be basically an old school type show, which is what JD's doing up there pretty much. We'll use maybe a couple of his guys, but I wanted to say anybody who is interested in being on the show, if we can pull it off, we do have someone who is willing to sponsor it. Did I tell you that?
You did, but you didn't go into too much detail. We'll have to talk a little more about that off there. Yeah, you brought that up.
We'll save that for a rainy day. But if they want to get a hold of me on my Facebook, it's Jeff Manning on Facebook. Get a hold of me there, or get a hold of Nick on his, and he'll get me your contact information. I'm not giving my phone number out quite yet. I don't want to be inundated this far in advance, but we'll be looking for guys either regionally or locally, or who's going to be out there for the convention who want to be in a nice, 6-match old school show. It's not just going to be people I know. People are my friends. That's not the idea behind this. It's get a lot of other people that I haven't met, but I know of or know about or somebody knows about. So if we can pull the show off, and right now we're sitting at probably 75% that it's going to happen. I'd like to be that to about 95 or 98% in the next month. And I'm sure Nick, with all of his posts on social media, will keep you all posted for the show. And then we will post my email and contact info at that point. But if you want an early start, get a hold of me on Facebook under Jeff Manning.
Now, Jeff, we asked Lenny, and it's always a fun to close on a little lighter note. You spent a bunch of time on the road around a lot of the characters in the pro wrestling business. I need to ask you, what's a funny road story you can leave us with here that may be PG-13 or slightly R? We're not going to go to the NC-17 area.
No, if it takes a couple minutes, is that okay? I don't want to cut into your other time. Okay, this is my favorite story. It involves Percy Pringle, obviously known as Paul Bearer, or Percy Pringle III. I was working with Marquez, as I said, and I get to the show one day to do my shtick, and he says, Jeff, do you mind going out and picking up Percy? My person who's going to do it isn't here, and there'll be another guy or two. Well, of course, this is where I've only got a rental car for two, basically. And so I said, sure, where is it? Just down the road. Well, down the road was about a half-hour drive. And I get there, and I see Percy coming out. The problem is there's three more, all big dudes. There's Adam Pierce, who I'd worked with, Colt Cabana, who I'd worked with, Nigel McGuinness I hadn't. And, of course, I got all their bags, and I got this little Toyota nothing car, the smallest Toyota they made at the time. And that was like 10, 12 years ago. So I'm looking, and okay, I used to referee hockey stuff, and I can pack a minivan. I had to learn how to pack a mini car pretty quick. Put all the big equipment bags in, a couple of the small ones, but I asked everybody to put the small bag on their lap. And, of course, they were happy with that. Percy had jumped in immediately to the front seat. Adam, Colt, and Nigel were kind of crowded in the back. And it's pretty crowded in there. So I say, hi, Percy, I'm Jeff Manning. Nice to meet you. He looks at me just like, and I know, oh, God darn, I'm in trouble. He says, is this the biggest effing car you can find? And I look at him and look at Adam, and Adam was, I'm going to say something I shouldn't. I said, I can put your effing ass on the roof rack up there and take you back to the show that way. You got a problem with that? Adam's laughing. Colt says, oh, Jeff, you shouldn't do that to Percy. And Nigel doesn't know me, just gives me that deer in a headlight stare. So I'm looking at Percy, go ahead, say something, big man. And he says, I think we'll get along just fine. That's one of my funniest stories. He could have slapped me, done anything, but it's like, I think he was playing and wanted to see how I'd respond. But you never know about things like that. You can take a chance. But that's how I've lived all my life, take a chance, and I'm still living, and I'm old enough to know better. That's one of my favorite road stories. There's many more that we'll share at a later date.
Absolutely. Jeff, we've
I
got
have
to
a
have
great
you.
Lenny story, but I don't want to give you two at the time. I'll save Lenny for as we're closer to the event.
I was going to say, yeah, we'll have to have you back, Jeff, for round 2, maybe 3 and 4 if you're up for it.
I do want to say one thing. Lenny got an award, got the Wrestler Award at Cauliflower Alley a number of years ago. He could have picked anybody, including Roddy, who was still alive, to be his introducer. He picks me. Another honor that I don't talk about much, but I got to tell you a story of what I said about him at that. That's for the future, because that's actually almost as funny as Percy Pringle saying dirty words to me.
Those are the best kind of words. Jeff, why don't you give everyone a plug on where you are, social media, if there's anything you want to hit them up with, some upcoming events that you're at.
I have given up most of my social media because let the young kids do it. I'm busy enough without having to do it, but I'm on Facebook as Jeff Manning. Northwest Pro, you can go there and see what I'm doing on that. I always joke, but social media is for those of you under 40. Are you in that category still, Nick?
I just turned 40. So
then you're done with social media, pal. That's
rats. We had a good run.
No. But you can always get a hold of me that way. Again, Nick, if somebody wants to talk to me, just forward my emails. You have them. And that's cool. And I'll also, real quick, we also did a stage show at the Plaza Hotel, strangely, 2 years ago, just before a Cauliflower. It was a variety show with pro wrestling in it. The whole thing was a storyline for 90 minutes. It was a lot of fun. And that's all I have to say.
Well, Jeff, thank you for having on tonight. Thank you for coming on tonight. Thank you for all of your help with, scouring locations for taking bids for the Pro Wrestling Expo that's happening on February 22nd. We'll definitely have you back. And everyone, make sure when you're out there, say hi to everyone's favorite Jeff Manning, a.k.a. my good friend Morty. Jeff, thank you so much again for coming on.
Thank you, Nick and Ray. I'm not sure what you do over here, but thank you for letting me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We love you, man.
Good night, guys.
Take care, Jeff.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puroresu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron. I'm talking about that $5 all access tier over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts for just $5, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. We also offer remastered versions of the earliest episodes of The Grenade Show covering the 1989 NWA project. Includes enhanced sound quality, plus new content and conversation never heard before. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series covering many past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, Videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. And for those who like all of their podcasts in one nice, neat little pile, the WrestleCopia Patreon also offers a Patreon exclusive Spotify account. You can actually go over to your Spotify with your WrestleCopia Patreon credentials. Instead of listening or downloading directly from Patreon, you can go over to Spotify, listen to all the latest shows, including all of the early releases. And you get all of that and so much more for just $5. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come. All right, Jeff Manning. That was fun.
Jeff's great. Yeah, Jeff, like I was saying, Ray, huge help with actually visiting a lot of venues with that were in consideration for the Pro Wrestling Expo, because I haven't been out to Portland. I didn't know a lot about the different communities, the different areas in town, but I knew that I wanted the Pro Wrestling Expo, the Portland Wrestling Expo, rather, to be in Portland. I know if we were doing something in tribute to the Pacific Northwest, obviously, Don Owens ran a lot of big towns over there, but there was none bigger than Portland, and that's where he wanted to be. And Jeff was able to kind of help me narrow it down to a few different possible locations, and we settled on the Holiday Inn at the airport, which is really convenient. It has a 24-hour shuttle, so anybody that is coming in, they'll be able to take the shuttle right from the airport to the hotel and then back to the airport when they're leaving. There's also a secondary stop with, I forgot the name of the location, but the secondary stop that the shuttle makes also is where a lot of the restaurants and food trucks are too. So, there's going to be a bar restaurant in the hotel, but, sometimes you want to get out of the hotel. I think we've got a winner with the Holiday Inn at the Portland Airport, and I know we've got a winner with the PWE, the Portland Wrestling Expo.
Food, wrestling, a bar, a shuttle. Man, sign me up.
Hey, Ray, I'm holding you to it. I'm hoping you can make it out there. You're going to be.
Oh, we really hope so, too.
Now, Ray, I know someplace you were recently, SummerSlam. You had a good time SummerSlam weekend. Why don't you tell me about your experiences with the WWE's biggest show of the summer?
Sure, yeah. So I talked to you shortly before we went. I took the kids. My brother came up from Cincinnati. We went to SummerSlam, which was my first any wrestling event in probably a good near 10 years, and my first pay-per-view in, I think, since like 2008. I really haven't, been watching as closely as I used to once upon a time, but I definitely wanted the kids to go before they go back to school. And, I went to SummerSlam 96 when it was here. So it was kind of like a full circle for me. And my brother didn't get to go with me there, and I always felt bad about that. So it was cool to have him. But honestly, the show, a lot of people, I saw Meltzer calling it predictable online and things like that, but shouldn't good wrestling be predictable to a degree, right? Like, we don't need a swerve, bro, just for the sake of a swerve. And it was thoroughly enjoyable. Everything made sense. The guys, and the girls busted their butts in the ring. It was really, really a good time. The only gripes I had, and you warned me about it before I went, you said, man, getting out of those like WrestleMania time period, you were like, getting out of there sucked, that whole area. And that sucked. Trying to get home. We were about 30 minutes from the stadium, but it took about 2.5 hours to get home.
Ooh, I was just going to ask you how traffic was.
I never saw anything like it.
One of the, obviously, wrestling's such a beautiful thing, and it's shared love of it shared by so many people. But for the big events, there's people coming from everywhere. So there's traffic in all directions as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. In fact, the traffic wasn't moving, and it looked like something out of a movie. When we left, it was a sea of people crossing this bridge that goes over the highway, and you literally couldn't see anything but people. And I said, "Man, this is not a good place to be if somebody shanks you. Like the ambulance ain't getting in here. We're screwed, you know." And then you every street entire downtown Cleveland was just cars as far as you could see, but nobody was moving. So we kind of walked out of the big pile of people, and we waited about 2 hours before the roads were moving. And then the Uber guy finally picked us up and took about half an hour to get home. But yeah, that was I'm getting too old for this shit, I guess, to quote Danny Glover. But,
great quote, by the way. Great quote.
And it sure is.
Now, Ray, let me ask you. Now, you're someone like me that grew up going to, not necessarily smaller shows, but in smaller than football-sized stadium venues.
Right, right.
Compare going to the shows when you were younger to, these massive super shows with 70,000 people now.
Yeah, it's a different world, different ball game. I know they've cut back recently on the big entrances, so I kind of missed that because I never got to see that. I'd never been to a stadium show before. So, whatever. That's okay though. But I mean, in general, just being there, it was a different world to me. Outside of like what was the Q, the Gunda Arena, the Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse now where the Cavs play, that's the biggest arena I'd been to that I could think of in watching wrestling. So this is like triple that. I think there was like 57,000 if you believe what they say. And then at the same time, the Indians were playing, the Guardians, 37,000 people there. And that let out right during the middle of Cody Rhodes' main event. Oh, so, I mean, you're talking brutal. Nearly 100,000 people downtown. And hey, the Hawk Tuah girl was down there at the same time. So, I mean, there was just a lot going on.
I mean, I figured the Hawk Tuah girl alone's going to draw 100,000 people. So throw her in the mix there. And yeah, you've got a lot of stuff going on. And it's awesome that you said you got to share it with your brother. You got to share it with your children. I've got a couple of boys, and I could tell you that right now their interest in pro wrestling is very limited. So one day I hope to go to a show with them and, get that full circle experience that you got.
Yeah. And, just not to change subject, but in regards to my boys, my oldest boys, their interest in wrestling, their love for wrestling is very organic. I never forced it on them. I never said, "Hey, sit down, you're watching this." I've never done that one time in my life. And it just organically happened, over time. They grew all this interest, and, they even go back and watch the old stuff. They try to learn a little bit about the history of wrestling, not just the current product, but they certainly enjoy the current product. So, especially now that it makes sense anyway. And when I say current product, I mean WWE.
Sure. Now that's still when people talk about wrestling. I work with a lot of current AEW talent. Most of the times when I say AEW to the mainstream fan or even someone that just knows WWE, they either assume I'm talking about WWE or they don't know what I'm talking about. So yeah, it's very true that WWE is still the big gorilla that's running everything.
Boy, they're doing a hell of a job right now. Yeah, but it was just a spectacle for me to be there and see everything. And we had pretty good seats, basically facing the hard camera, but in the very bottom of the lower deck. So it was still really good and center ring, and you look up right above the actual ring. They got a video. So if you need to see something, real close up, it was right there, 2 inches above it as far as your eyes were concerned. So yeah, it was a good time, good seat. We didn't overpay like some people were doing. I didn't feel like I got ripped off anyway. So yeah, no, it was a good time, and everybody enjoyed themselves. I was happy.
Glad to hear, Ray. And I was enjoying myself that night. I was doing some of the virtual signings. The last virtual signing of the weekend was literally going head to head with SummerSlam when the main event was going on. Yeah, I had Ella Envy from the NWA, and her boyfriend was in the room also with us. He was actually watching the end of the show with the press conference on his phone while the virtual signing was going on. That was one of those connecting everything moments. Got some other stuff planned on my end for August. August was otherwise, of course, had the 4 virtual signings, Val Venus, Dennis Condrey, the Grappler, and Ella Envy. Private with Masahiro Chono. We have one more signing for the month of August, and it's another international superstar. I'm a huge fan of Puroresu, and this one, I could say about 18, 19, 20 years ago, there was no wrestler in the world that I like more than KENTA. And I have KENTA on August 29th, a private signing with KENTA. It's going to be in Queens, New York. Photos are posted now on the main page. Still some time to get your mail-in items in. DM the Captain's Corner page, and we'll give you all the details on that. Ray, were you a fan of Pro Wrestling Noah in the mid-2000s?
You know, I was a huge fan of All Japan. So when they tried to switch over, when Noah was developed, I tried to go against it initially. But after about a month, Nick, I gave in. I said, I can't miss my Japanese wrestling.
A whole month?
Yeah. So, no, it didn't take long for me to catch on to Noah.
I was also a huge fan of All Japan Pro Wrestling. When I got into when I expanded my my horizons in like around 96, 97, 98, that was when, of course, Misawa, Kobashi, Kawada, Taue were running hot. And I became a huge fan of All Japan as well. I kept my fandom through Noah. I remember the first takeaway, of course, was the green ring, right? It looks so different those first two times you see it. And then after a while, it's really like, okay, this is just Noah. But KENTA, even though he made his debut in All Japan Pro Wrestling, he was one of those first breakout guys from Noah. Him and Marufuji, because what we loved about All Japan is that they didn't necessarily always do a good job of kind of bringing people up to that main event level. There was a lot of familiar faces there, and it was almost like a glass ceiling for a lot of the natives, especially. Yeah. That was what I really enjoyed about early Noah, and at KENTA, still to this day, he's killing it in New Japan. He had the run as Hideo Itami in NXT. I don't know if he made the main roster for WWE, but got a 25-year pro now, and I'm really looking forward to our private signing.
That's absolutely awesome, and you're really bringing in some names, and it's just every time I pop on Facebook, I'll get that little blurb up, Captain's Corner update, and I click on it, and I see what you got coming. Sometimes I miss things, and then when you announce it, I go, holy shit, that happened, or that's coming up. That's pretty damn cool. I didn't see that yet. If you announced that online, that's pretty damn cool. I'm looking forward to that. That's got to be a fun time for you, man.
Yeah, no, it is. This year, between the KENTA signing, working with Minoru Suzuki earlier this year, of course, the big Glory Days GrappleCon in Florida with Barry Rose, the Hulk Hogan private signing that actually has been temporarily postponed. It was supposed to be July 29th. It's been pushed back to early September. There's just so much that's been going on that I've been able to scrape off my bucket list. And, going out to the Pacific Northwest is another one. We announced Lenny Denton, the Grappler, as our first guest. Jeff Manning will be here. We're going to have another announcement coming up this Tuesday night, and we're going to have some other guests on future episodes of the Captain's Corner podcast with my man Ray coming up. So Ray, as always, you and the WrestleCopia network that has us on is far and away so important to keeping this alive and, keeping the Captain's Corner podcast news coming to everyone out there in audio land.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the Portland Wrestling Expo. I mean, give me a reason, Nick Masci, and to get out there. And I've never been there myself, and that would be something else if I could make it. But we'll have to wait and see. That's quite a ways off. A lot can happen between now and then with me. But I mean, if I can be there, man, that would be absolutely tremendous to be a part of that. But I'm looking forward to hearing, some of the people you got coming in there and everything else you got going on. Guys, make sure you stay tuned to Nick. Nick, tell them about your social media.
Check us out. We're on Instagram at Captain's Corner. We're at Facebook, Captain's Corner. Typically the Captain's Corner logo or an upcoming signing is our avatar. And usually have 5-6 days a week worth of news. The big news right now is, of course, we just announced the venue for the Portland Wrestling Expo on February 22nd. We put photos up for KENTA. I'll give you a little breaking news. In the next week or so, we're going to announce another signing with a 16-time former world champ that I'm not able to announce publicly yet, but I think that could have narrowed it down to maybe one person. so a lot of big stuff happening in Captain's Corner, and Ray, you've given us the platform to kind of bring that to your ears.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. It's always great to do this and sit down. We did it with the GrappleCon, and now we're doing it with Captain's Corner Pod, which, as far as I'm concerned, never has to go away because there's always something happening at Captain's Corner. And the maiden voyage was great. You got me back home safe and sound, so we're doing it again here this week, and I'm looking forward to next time.
Well, Ray, episode 3, if we keep this momentum going, episode 3 is going to be the biggest and best of them all, much like WrestleMania 3. So I'm looking forward to that coming up. But Ray, as always, you are such an amazing, I can't even call you a co-host. You are the host, Ray. I'm just kind of, someone here to accentuate, the hosting capabilities of yourself. But Thank you so much for all that you do, Ray.
I appreciate the kind words, Nick. We'll talk again soon.
Cheers to the working man.